Australia has been declared one of the most expensive places to buy property. In Sydney, there are suburbs more expensive than Manhattan. In Melbourne, the median house price is $700,000. The crisis has left young people wondering if they'll ever be able to afford their own home. But experts believe something different is happening in Perth. Stephanie Garnaut reports.
Can I suggest $550 if you like to stay with me now, $550,000 if you like.
I'm 23, I really want to buy a house one day, but looking at the housing prices, it's absolutely not going to happen.
So I'm 19 and at the moment I don't really think about owning a house, but it does definitely concern me thinking about the future.
I'm almost 21. And when I think about buying a house, it's like a distant dream that's never going to happen.
Like, whoa, how am I ever going to be able to afford that?
For years, the average Australian family was able to buy its first home on one wage. Now, median house prices are 9 times the average income. Many young people are worried they'll never be able to afford a house. The crisis was highlighted by a recent Four Corners report.
But while property prices have shot up, wages have barely moved. That's why in 2014, the International Monetary Fund ranked Australia as the 3rd most expensive country in the world to buy property.
But experts say it's a different story in Perth. Finance analyst Tim Treadgold says housing affordability here is improving.
The situation in Sydney is quite different to Perth. In Sydney, property prices have exploded. They're being driven by foreign investors, they're being driven by Australian investors, and their property prices have been going up very sharply each year. And that has certainly had a tremendous effect on less wealthy property buyers. Perth is different. Perth, we're going the other way.
Perth experienced this between 2000 and 2002 all the way to 2007, 2008. So we've had our boom. They're having their boom now.
Jay Ho from the Housing Economics Research Program at the Curtin Business School says WA doesn't follow the national economic cycle.
Perth and eastern states, their economies, their housing cycles are not the same. When the eastern states was hurting, we were booming, and now we're kind of hurting and they're booming.
Laszlo Solosi is a mortgage broker. He says interest rates on mortgages are at an all-time low.
So, house prices are certainly much higher than what they were 20, 30 years ago. Incomes are much higher than what they were 20, 30 years ago. But interest rates are significantly lower than what they were 20 to 30 years ago.
In the 80s and 90s, they were around 17%. Now they're at 4%. But for Perth buyers, young people still find it a huge struggle to buy a house. The rate of home ownership among 25 to 34-year-olds has been falling for the last 30 years and is now less than 50%. 31-year-old Gemma Merrick is a stay-at-home mother of 2. She says it's not possible to pay off a mortgage on her husband's income alone, so they've had to push back their dream of owning a house.
When we were looking around, the prices were just way out of our range. I was pregnant at the time and knew that I'd be a full-time stay-at-home mum, and that would drop our income as well, and so it just wasn't possible with the prices.
She's not sure if they'll ever be able to afford their own home.
We've just decided that because I want to be at home with our kids, that is something we'll sacrifice and maybe do later once they're at school.
The recent budget was quiet on the topic of housing affordability. A day after the budget, Malcolm Turnbull told the ABC's John Fain that intergenerational loans were the solution.
What, are your kids locked out of the housing market?
Yes.
Well, you should shell out for them. You should support them, wealthy man like you.
That's what they say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. You see, you've got the solution in your own hands.
It was obviously a jokey exchange, but it's already been compared to this moment last year by former Liberal Treasurer Joe Hockey.
The starting point for a first home buyer is to get a good job that pays good money. If housing were unaffordable in Sydney, no one would be buying it.
Housing affordability is expected to be a key election issue. 2 months ago, Labor announced it would restrict negative gearing to make it easier for first home buyers to enter the market. Negative gearing is the practice that allows investors to offset losses on investment properties against their taxable income in order to get a tax break. The coalition says Labor's policy would smash the value of house prices. Jay Ho says that whatever the politicians decide, there's a big danger for West Australians.
Because Western Australia does not follow the national economic cycles, it means that if the federal government makes changes for the large majority of Australia, which is the eastern states, we might be on the losing end.
But for mums like Gemma, all she wants to know is that one day her family will be able to achieve the great Australian dream and be able to purchase their own home.
It doesn't really matter who delivers on these promises. I just want a nice, safe place where I can raise my kids.